This is the definition of a baseball body. Oops. Nope, not that. This. Now, this might surprise you. At 6 feet, 270 pounds, Daniel Vogelbach looks more like a lineman than a star baseball player these days. But don't let his body or his 236 batting average fool you. He is very good at baseball. And thanks to some smart people in the Mets organization, which pains me to say, he is only getting better. But he hasn't always been the example of Major League excellence. How did he get here, and what has he done this year to make him so good? If you're like me, you've probably only heard of Daniel Vogelbach in passing over the past couple of seasons. And this isn't surprising. Despite being a major leaguer since 2016, his career up to this point has been mostly unimpressive. Coming into 2022, Vogelbach only had one season where he had an F4 of higher than 0. Because in addition to below average hitting, Vogelbach, unsurprisingly, was very limited defensively. In fact, for 65% of his career, he's been his team's designated hitter. But designated hitters who can't hit aren't usually in high demand, even for guys like Vogelbach who have high power and on-base potential. And if you can't prove yourself, teams will move on pretty quickly. And this designated hitter is a prime example of this. If you were to look at his transaction history, you'd find that he's been constantly on the move. Since being drafted by the Cubs in 2011, Vogey has been in 6 organizations. This might not sound like a lot, especially when you compare him to guys like Jesse Chavez, who holds the record for the most times traded, and has been in 9 different organizations, including multiple stints with 5 of them. Welcome back to the Braves. But aside from a 2016 trade that sent Vogelbach from Chicago to Seattle in 2016, all of this movement has been within the past 3 seasons. From Seattle to a 2-game stint in Toronto, to Milwaukee, to Pittsburgh, to New York. All of this happened in just a little over 2 calendar years. So what happened? We'll start with the bad. Coming off an All-Star appearance in 2019, the beginning of 2020 was ugly for the DH. Through his first 18 games, he had a batting average under 1 and only 2 homers. This was good for a 39 WRC+, 61% worse than league average. And with a negative .5 F4 through those 18 games, he was on pace for worse than a negative 4 WAR season across a full 162 games. Players this bad normally don't have a chance to see a full season. So the Mariners traded him to Toronto for nothing. And after going hitless in a whopping 5 plate appearances, the Blue Jays also cut him loose. Things were starting to look dire for the 27-year-old, but after 2 days in limbo, Vogelbach found a new home, and he caught fire with Milwaukee.
Very competitive person, and I don't like losing.
Payoff pitch, back up the middle and through.
And he hits one in the air, deep left center. Vogelbach has gone back-to-back with Braun. Vogelbach has gone deep again. A lot of power, and Vogelbach just split the baseball in half.
In a complete reversal of his first 69 plate appearances, Vogey's next 67 were about as good as you could get. He hit 328, 418, and slugged 569. This was good for a 165 WRC+. It seemed like he'd found a new home in Milwaukee. And despite pitchers hitting again in 2021, the Brewers decided to keep him even with limited positional flexibility. The Brewers' plan had been to start Keston Hiura at first, but that plan quickly changed as Hiura struggled and was eventually sent down to AAA at the beginning of May. After that, it was Vogey's spot to lose, and he did fine. His April was actually his worst month, which makes the Brewers' decision to essentially hand him the first base starting job surprising. But he heated up, and through 18 games in June, he had hit 4 bombs and had a 117 WRC+ for the month. This is nowhere near the 18-game stint he had with the Brewers in 2020, but this is still good. Unfortunately, this happened.
He's not. He came up limping, and he's trying to hobble to the plate, and he's going to get there.
Thanks to this injury, Vogey missed 2 months, and while he was able to make it back at the beginning of September and then hit this walk-off grand slam, it wasn't enough to save his stat sheet entirely, and it wasn't enough to convince the Brewers to renew his contract. On November 30th, a day before MLB owners instituted a lockout that halted transactions for almost 100 days, Vogey was released. So how did he go from being released to getting a video praising how good he is in less than a year? First, let's talk about something he's been excellent at for years now. This is something that's probably encouraged teams to take a chance on him in the first place. And no, I'm not talking about his ability to hit the ball hard. I'm talking about his chase rate. Vogey is one of the most patient hitters in the league. Since his first full season in the big leagues in 2019, his highest swing rate on pitches outside the zone is 20.2%. Let's compare that with a notorious chaser like Javi Baez, whose lowest chase rate in his career is 39.3%. Essentially, Baez at his best is still swinging at twice as many balls as Vogey is at his worst. Not swinging at pitches out of the zone does 2 things for you. First, it means you're 1 ball closer to getting on base via a walk and 1 strike further away from a strikeout. The pros and cons of this is obvious. One puts you on first and the other puts you right back in the dugout. But the second benefit isn't just about walking or striking out. It's about getting a better pitch to hit. See, there's a big difference in how well hitters do depending on whether they're ahead or behind in the count. Let's take a look at this sequence from May 11th. This plate appearance ends in a walk, but I'll get to something more fun in a second. Down 1-2 in the count, Vogey spits on this nice changeup, this four-seamer, and after fouling 2 back, this four-seamer up. While balls 3 and 4 weren't particularly compelling pitches, they still had enough break to elicit a swing. I mean, compare this location on this foul with this ball. He did chase one. After all, you are told as a kid to protect the plate with 2 strikes. But even Vogelbach, who has one of the best contact rates in the league, still fails to make contact 36% of the time he chases. If he swings at any one of these, he's probably walking back to the bench. Instead, he takes his base. Now let's look at something a little more fun. On the first pitch of the at-bat, Kyle Wright just misses with his slider. This is the type of pitch that could conceivably draw a swing, but instead of a 0-1 count, it's 1-0. Wright follows this with a strike down the middle that Vogey spits on. It wasn't his pitch, and after another ball, Vogey does this.
Vogelbach drives one to deep right field, and that ball's out of here.
So why was the first ball so important? Because across the board, hitters do better in counts that favor them. This is a chart of how well hitters fare after certain counts. After 1-0 counts, hitters were OPSing 936. This is like being Austin Riley no matter who you are. But flip that ball into a strike and suddenly you're Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. And your OPS decreases with each subsequent strike. After 1-2 counts, you're one of the worst hitters in the league. And this is what makes Vogey so valuable, even before his breakout season. He gave himself the best possible chance to have the most favorable counts possible. The only problem is, coming into the season, he wasn't quite able to capitalize on this. For Vogey to break out this season, he needed to start lifting. No, not that kind. In March, right after the lockout, Vogelbach found his way onto one of the worst teams in baseball on a 1-year deal. With the universe of the age back in here to stay, it allowed him to return to the spot he was most familiar with. This is the position that Vogey played where he was most successful in 2019. In his only full season, Vogey had a launch angle of 17.1. In every season aside from that, his average launch angle sat between 10.1 and 11.7. That's about a 6-degree separation, and we're not talking about Kevin Bacon. If you're not a big launch angle fan, I get it. It's true, hitters aren't deciding to hit the ball with an exact 17-degree launch angle, and they can't hit the ball within a certain launch angle 100% of the time. But there are ways to work your swing to increase lift. This is how someone like Josh Donaldson went from being a fringe major leaguer at best to one of the best players in the game over a 5-year period. Likewise, if you're a guy like Vogelbach, someone who hits the ball hard anyway, having a higher launch angle helps balls like this, which end up being singles, end up like balls like this, which end up being home runs. In 2019, Vogelbach hit 30 home runs. He was averaging a bomb every 18.6 plate appearances. Last season, where he was just slightly below league average, he was averaging a homer every 28 plate appearances. Essentially, this means that it was taking him an extra 2+ games between each homer. This year, his pace isn't quite what it was in 2019, but it is a game better. Additionally, he's doing something he's never done before. He's hitting doubles. Prior to this season, the most doubles he hit was 17. This season, he also has 17, but it's taken nearly a third of a season's fewer plate appearances to achieve that. The result, a 125 WRC+. 13% better than he's ever hit. But that's combined between the Pirates and the Mets. He's actually been even better with New York. But how? When the Mets traded for him at the end of July, they had a good idea of how they were going to use him. See, Vogey's a left-handed hitter, and like most lefties, he struggles against other lefties. This isn't a knock against Vogey either. Most hitters are worse against pitchers with the same handedness. Even Dodger star Freddie Freeman, who's 7th in the league for lefties against lefties, barely makes the top 100 overall against southpaws. However, Vogey isn't Freddie Freeman against lefties. He's not even Luis Arias, who is just slightly worse than league average against southpaws. He's one of the worst in the league. He's tied with Yankees legend Joey Gallo at 7th worst in the league with a 27 WRC+. But while the Pirates insisted on using him against essentially any lefty, the Mets had better plans. In addition to adding the star of this video, they acquired righty Darren Ruff, who mashes lefties, to make sure Vogey didn't need to face any. And Buck Showalter has stuck to this plan to a T. Since being acquired by the Mets on July 23rd, Vogey has over 100 plate appearances with the team. However, he only has 5 against left-handed pitchers. And because of that, he has been his best yet. With the Mets, he has a 148 WRC+, and he's reaching base nearly 40% of the time while also slugging 6% better than he did with the Pirates. And surprisingly, this isn't due to an influx of homers. Instead, he's doubling more, blessing the world with more videos like this.
Is in. Vogelbach digging for second. He slides in safely with a run-scoring double.
Vogelbach is a specialized player. He probably shouldn't ever play 162 games, he probably shouldn't play defense, and sadly he probably won't steal bases. He's still at 0. But he does 2 things incredibly well. He gets on base and he hits the ball hard. And as a Braves fan, I hate the Mets to have him.